Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Tori Riley. Hi Tori.
Hi Asu.
It's lovely to speak to you today. Now, I've got an interesting bio here from Tori. So, as an expat, my love of Indonesia textiles and culture grew. I spent time out in Indonesia as a young child, a teenager, and as a young adult. When I was out there, I learned a lot about the culture and I studied Batik in Jogja. I hope I've said that right.
Yep.
The historical and cultural capital of Java, the main industrial island of Indonesia. After this, I've studied Fine Art BA Honours and taught 16 to 19-year-olds in the UK and now settled in Burley in Lancashire in the northwest of England. But I've never lost my interest and passion in the material and in batik. So this is why I like to share my interest by doing talks and workshops in and around the northwest of England. So there we are. Short but sweet. And there was a real challenge there because I'll just tell you why I was laughing about Jogja, because it's spelt something that it doesn't look at all like it sounds. Right, brilliant. Yeah, I love doing this. I'll learn something new every day with this. So now, just as we were chatting before we pressed record, I was just chatting there with Tori about how she'd finished up in Indonesia. I'm sure there's lots of interesting things will come creeping out as we chat. So now, links, yes, before I forget. Now, the best places to find Tori, follow her on her Facebook page and on Instagram. So in Facebook, she is there as Batik Inspirations, and on Instagram, it's Batik Inspirations UK. So, of course, I'll put those links in Tori's episode of Stitchery Stories. And in there also, we have her email address and also a phone number. Okay, then. So, yay for me, done the links. Would you like to share with us, Tori, what you're working on at the moment and what's got you excited?
Well, at the moment, I'm working on drawings based off Indonesian batik patterns. So I'm looking through a catalogue of old batik that I have, some going back as far as the 70s when my parents first went out there, and some that I bought out there in the 90s.
Yeah.
Looking at the traditional patterns and doing some drawings based off that, then I can use those in a sort of black and white, so you just got ink drawing of the outlines. And I thought then I could use those for people to copy if they're doing the batik workshop. So I'll have kind of like a colouring book version of patterns.
Right.
And then also I was going to work on embroidering some bits. The project we've got going on at Pendle Embroiderers Guild is we're working through a stitch book. So you're kind of working through different stitches and what I was going to do is use those patterns in my book, so it kind of represents me.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Yeah, and that'd be quite interesting, won't it? Because as you say, it's like outlines of designs and things. So I think that'd be quite nice then as a challenge as well to think, well, how can I interpret some of these designs in different stitches?
Yes, because myself and my daughter are very into those Zen colouring books, and they're all very nice and detailed, like an adult colouring book.
Yeah.
She's 9, but she really is interested in doing those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, while I was doing these patterns, they're very similar to that, and I thought I could put them together, and it would be good as a reference and all sorts for other people and for myself.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really brilliant idea. And it's interesting that you're basing them on old pieces that you've collected in your family, as you say, for years as well. So I think that's nice that these things are traditional designs or designs that already exist in that are being brought back to life to a new audience.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously, you're saying there in your bio about spending time in Indonesia and getting into batik. So what was it that got you, I suppose, interested really? What sparked the interest from being a small child and being out there? What got you interested, and how have you learnt the skills and kind of developed this interest into something that you're running now?
Well, I think from a very young age, my first memory of what I wanted to do as a job was I decided I wanted to do a job as colouring in all day, which...
Do you know what a fantastic job that would be, colouring in.
It would be great. So I think my passion for, art and crafts were there from a very young age. And, growing up in sort of different countries, some of that culture sort of influenced me in growing up. And I remember thinking the batik was absolutely amazing and I wanted to know more about it. And when I did my GCSEs, I studied it out there, but I just did a brief course. And I remember thinking, well, I want to go back and do more. And when I got to college and I did my foundation art course, I decided after that, well, actually, I managed to convince somebody else on my course that they wanted to go out there and do it as well. So we went traveling around Indonesia before I went to do my degree. And I spent a whole month in Jogja. Out there, you don't have school going the whole day because it gets too hot. So you get up nice and early. It's cooler in the morning. So you go and you study. And then we just did touristy things in the afternoon. It was brilliant.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Oh, how nice.
Oh, yeah. And because I'd just done my foundation course, I'd got really inspired with doing sketches outside and stuff. So we went round the temples of the Prambanan and the Borobudur, and we sat down and we did drawings because we had all afternoon. When you go to Jogja often or somewhere, you don't have very long somewhere. So you just kind of quickly whisk round and take a few photos and head off. But we had time to sit and draw, and we did create a large crowd of Indonesians behind us. But we kind of got renowned for sitting on stairs and doing drawings all over the place.
Oh, so that's wonderful. But how nice, though, to spend the travelling time, gap year idea, or, taking some time out and going to travel, but learning a new skill while you're there, and just say focusing on art and so forth. That must have really helped you, I don't know, just be enthusiastic and creative, and then move on to your degree. That must have been such a brilliant foundation for doing that.
Because not only was I learning the techniques, we were a lot more engrossed in the culture because we were just living out there. So it was amazing.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And so even from a small child then, you was living out in Indonesia as well. So do you think that's where the colouring in thing came from?
Probably, because there's so many bright colours out there. I mean, their colour palette is slightly different to what we would have in the West. And so a lot of the batik I bought is what I quite liked. But if you go out there, there are some interesting bright colour combinations that you probably wouldn't see here.
But I think that's what makes it really nice sometimes, just to see the different colours and ideas.
Well, even things like the trees, there are all so many varieties of green in the foliage, and the soil, because it's a very volcanic area, it's bright. It's almost sort of a deep terracotta colour. So it's really quite almost red. It's not brown.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. And so you've kept that, obviously you're back in the UK now, so you've kept your batik alive. Is that something that you've spent a lot of time doing, or do you I know you mentioned you've got kids as well, these things kind of taken a back seat for a while? It does, and I think I have, especially when the older ones were younger, I did do less and less of it. I'm now picking it up a bit more since my youngest son started school. I then had a fourth, so So I do have 4 kids to kind of juggle, and so the time doing it is hard. But my older 2 are very interested in learning, so I'm teaching them. So it's good. Oh, that's nice, and it's something as well, I think, that appeals to children as well as adults. You can see how children could get started with it and get some fairly quick results in doing something. Yes, obviously going to Java and Jogja, I'll have to say it again. Yes. Was obviously deeply inspiring for you. Is there other inspirations that keep you going, Tori? Well, I really do like looking in the galleries and stuff like that, and looking at the different artists and what they're doing. And I think people that have influenced me are artists like Anish Kapoor. Right. Because he was from India and he came and he's settled in the UK, his work is multicultural in the sense that he's British but also Indian influence and things like that. And it's
It's an interesting combination of cultures. When people asked where I was from as a child, I used to say I was fusion because I felt that because I was British, but it was like all these other cultures have surrounded me and influenced me. So, I think that he influenced me in his work and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting saying there about when people say to you, where are you from? It sounds like a simple question, but obviously you have, through your family situation, have moved around all over the place, haven't you? So has that informed you in any way, or how do you think that's affected you in a nice way? I mean,
well, I think it has given me a rich tapestry to sort of influence my art and who I am personality wise. Yes. So I think I've been very lucky and had a very unique background.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you also said you spent time in Texas as well.
Yeah.
So does that come out in any kind of artistic endeavour at all? Or is it really Indonesia is your artistic inspiration?
Well, I think when we were out there, my mum got really into quilting, and she actually used some of her batik that she'd bought out in Indonesia to do quilts. And so I quite like patchwork and quilting and stuff like that. So that does sort of influence what I do. But I again, because most of the batik's done on cotton, it's ideal for patchwork.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting. So your mum's into batik as well then?
Well, yeah, but she was taught by my grandmother and all sorts about how to sew. So she did sort of dressmaking. She used to make loads of our clothes.
Right, yeah.
She used the batik in that way. She bought the materials and then sewed with them.
Yeah.
But whereas I actually do go back to the thing of actually making the batik itself. So, I get the plain white cotton and then produce something from that.
Right.
In fact, I did a workshop at Pendle and they were making handbags and they needed cotton. And I thought, I can do that. I've got loads of cotton. And I came in and she was most impressed that not only, was I making my own handbag, but I actually made the material.
Fabulous. Yeah, that's really good. And it is really nice, isn't it, to feel that, as you say, you've made everything about something. And I think the idea about bringing embroidery into your batik as well, I think is a nice extension of that. And I'm sure that lends itself to it really nicely.
Yeah, well, in some ways, when you start with sewing, you're on a blank canvas, whereas if you have a piece of batik, you've got something to work with. It's like you're not starting with a blank page,
which is really hard, isn't it? Sometimes I find when you go to some things and everyone says, right, come up with some idea for a brooch or whatever, and I just sit there and I know I'll never come up with anything. I know I won't. I've got to percolate things. It takes me a while for either something either come to me straight away, or otherwise I've really got to go and have a proper think. I can't ever come up with things. So sometimes workshops, I kind of dread it. I have to know what I'm doing first so I can have a think.
Well, that's why I give people the option to draw whatever patterns they want on the material, or if I've got I've got these sketches so that people can actually copy them. If they put them underneath the cotton, they can trace it because it's done with ink, and the ones who want to do their own thing can.
Brilliant. So talking about techniques, would you just like to explain about batik and how you do it, and even about transferring designs, and just kind of talk us through that, please, Tori, because I know zero about this.
Batik is a dyed resist technique. So where the wax is applied to the fabric, that area will not absorb the dye. So you can dye the fabric and then you remove the wax, and that little bit is left is sort of the background color.
Yeah.
You can layer that on. So you can you get a white piece of cotton, you can draw your pattern, and then you can dye it, and then you could go over it with some more wax and dye it again. So you could get sort of the pale blue to a dark blue, and you can layer it like that, or you can sort of batik a drawing with the chantings, the tools that you use to draw it onto, paint in the dyes into your picture, and then you can wax over that and then dye your background color.
Oh, right, and do it the other way kind of thing. So then the wax is protecting the colour that you've already put down.
Yes.
Right,
so you can cover over bits to protect those. And so it basically works as a barrier. So a bit like if you're doing watercolours and you use masking fluid, it's those areas that you just kind of peel away that and you're left with your background.
Right. So when you're marking out your design, do you use pencil or do you just kind of put it over something? How do How do you
Well,
do
what
that?
you do, you just use yourself a good drawing with a light box, and you put your fabric on top, and you draw it with a HB pencil, because once you've got the wax and you've boiled the fabric, you don't see any marks from the pencil. And obviously, with other types of things that you'd probably use with embroidery, you can't use one that disappears with liquid, because you're putting liquid on, because wax is liquid at that time. You can't do anything with heat, because of course it's hot. So basically you are left with the simplest option of just using a HB pencil.
You know what? Sometimes simple is best anyway, isn't it? So.
Yes. Well, I remember from when I was in Houston, they said that when the astronauts in America were learning how to find a pen to write in zero gravity, and there was always the joke that the astronaut was talking to the cosmonaut, and he was like, we've got this pen and it really works really well. And the cosmonaut goes, we've got a pencil.
So, works just as well. Always going to work. Oh, brilliant! Yeah. All right. So that's good then. Learn a bit more about that. So is the different now? Here's something. Is the different styles of batik according to different areas and regions? Does that make sense?
Certainly, yes. Within Indonesia, even on the island of Java, which seems relatively small in comparison to some of the other islands. I think it's bigger than England, but when you're looking at a map, it looks quite small, because Borneo is huge.
This is it. We lose all sense of scale, don't we? Think, it's just an island like, the Isle of Wight or somewhere. But no.
So they vary quite a bit in the patterns and designs that they use. But batik is not just found in Indonesia. It's found all over the world, China, in Thailand, all sorts of areas in Asia. But it's also, as the Indonesia was owned by the Dutch for a while, they used to try and mass produce, and the British tried to mass produce it. So we tried taking it to places like Africa and getting them to mass produce it. And I think the Dutch even tried to sell it back to the Indonesians, but they didn't like the styles and colours. And now it's become a very traditional fabric out in Africa.
Right.
But that's how that travelled. And it's, I think the oldest piece that has been found was actually in Egypt as well. So they don't know exactly how far it goes back in a lot of the different countries, because in hot countries like Indonesia, it is humid, so the fabrics rot, and also a lot of the traditional dyes weren't as photostable, so they kind of faded.
So things rotted and faded away, literally. So there isn't necessarily a record, is there, of
and I
these
think
things.
Nowadays we actually want to record things, and we look at history a lot more, where I don't think we did in the past as much. So
that's actually a really good point, because I think even when we're making things for ourselves as well, I'm sure we're all guilty of making pieces, embroidery or whatever. And do we always put our name on it? And do we put a date on it? And do we explain what it is?
No.
I mean, I actually do now, and I have done for a number of years. I do make an effort on the back of a piece, or certainly on its frame or whatever. I'll put something on there, because I'm sure we all find things in charity shops, don't we? Or people say, "Oh, look, there's lovely pieces, traditional embroidery," and you've got no idea who did it or anything. And it's just, I think it's a shame. And so I think we're guilty. We're saying, isn't it a shame that we don't know where all these things come from? But yet, things that we've created, nobody would know either, would they? So I think
no. And it's like stories from my grandparents. My grandmothers used to have really interesting stories about their styles and techniques and things like that. And I wish at the time I recorded it down, because I can pass it on by word of mouth, but in some ways it's like, but that information is all dying out. And I think it is with a lot of our traditional techniques as well. And hence the fact that I like the idea of being able to pass my embroidery skills and all of these things to my kids as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, isn't it? I mean, my boy's 15 now, but we do still have, he used to be quite fascinated when he used to get my sewing box out, or he's still quite interested actually in some of my embroidery and things. But we had, it's a couple of years ago now, actually, we need to finish it off. He decided he was going to make a Pikachu,
Oh, yes, Pokemon, yeah, of course. I have boys.
Exactly. So we made this Pikachu one Easter holidays. So he designed it, and then I said, right, well, could you cut it out and make it into a pattern? And then he had to sew on we cut out eyes and the different red cheeks, haven't he, and stuff like that.
Yes,
so he's sewn those on. And then I think that's as far as it's got. It's still in a box in the corner of the lounge. So I keep saying to him, right, we need to get this finished, don't we? And he kind of looks at me because I think now he's 15. I don't think he really wants to. But I thought, let's get it out and see if he gets enthusiastic about it. Of course, he wouldn't tell any of his friends, would he then? Of course. But, it is really important, isn't it, to try and get people interested in stuff like this. So what would you say then so far, Tori, has been the high point of your textile art and embroidery journey and using batik and so on so far?
Well, I obviously enjoyed doing my foundation degree and my fine art degree because we were learning all sorts of different techniques, and I'm always really interested in learning new things.
Yeah.
But I have thought nowadays I need to cut learning new ones because otherwise I just want to buy the equipment to do this and that. And I've done a bit of stained glass, and all sorts. And you're just like, well, actually, I don't have enough room for all of these hobbies.
I know.
All the time to get on with these things. So and then one of the things is when I did these glass making things, I now have a whole load of bits of glass jewelry that I don't know what to do with. Now I'm really quite interested in being able to pass on what I've learned to other people. And I've really enjoyed being able to share it and talk to people. And it's made me look at the batik that I have had and this project that I'm on at the moment. And I think I'm really enjoying that at the moment, doing that.
So how long have you been doing workshops and talks then, Tori?
It's been a couple of years, I think. I kind of started it, and I was a member of Manchester Embroiderers Guild at the time, and I started doing talks for them. And I thought, I could do this for other people, and and so it's been sort of slow, sort of gradually picking up. And I've done quite a few talks and workshops this year. At first, I started just doing the talks. But lots of people kept asking me for workshops because they would like to do it themselves. And so I put together, I kind of reinvested some of the money I'd got from the talks into bits of equipment to then do the workshops with. And I've been really enjoying that. It's great to see other people's talents and how they produce different bits of batik and how their skills influence their work.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite interesting as well, given that those of us in Embroiderers Guild particularly, typically we're doing embroidery. So I think it's nice sometimes to have a play with something different and kind of not get messy, but get messy. So I was going to ask you about the equipment. So is there a special thing to heat the wax? Do you need a special thing? How do you heat the wax up? I was going to ask you this before and I forgot, sorry.
I mean, there's certain different types of waxes which melt at different temperatures.
Right.
But for my workshops, I use paraffin wax, which melts at quite a low temperature. So for that, if you were wanting to start out, the ones you use for waxing your legs and stuff like that, but you need to get a good one of those that you can alter the temperature on.
Right.
But that can start off for about 20 quid, whereas my one, which I can alter a lot more to the temperature, it was, I think, designed out of Malaysia. It's that one is more like 200 quid. So a proper thing for melting wax. So if you take it seriously, you might want to invest it in a proper thing. But if you're wanting to start out, and you can get these chantings for about 7 quid, I think, if you look online as well.
And so it's that big gold thing.
Yes.
But you put the wax in the little thing at the top.
Yeah. So you have a little sort of pot, a small sort of pot, like twice the size of a thimble, and you would fill that with the wax. And it has a spout that comes off it that then you can draw the wax onto the fabric.
Right.
They also out in Indonesia use stamps. I remember at school and on my foundation, we used old coat hangers and bent those around and used those with a wine bottle cork. On the handle to stop you burning your hand. And I thought, well, that would be quite interesting to do because that's one way you can teach kids it without, they're having to spill the wax or anything.
Yeah. Now, so then the other thing I just thought about, so when you fill in the little thing at the top, how do you stop it from coming out the end?
Well, it's about the angle that you hold it.
Right.
Yes. So often when we try and do it in the West, we try to do it on a table and have it flat, and we're trying to draw it, and we find that the wax just drips all over the place. But out in Indonesia, they have it draped over their handle, and hand and it's over at an angle. And so when you're
Right.
drawing it, you can hold the spout up to a certain angle and it doesn't drip. And when you draw it onto the fabric, it flows nicely.
You see, there we are. That's what you get from being in the real place where they're actually doing it. You learn the techniques and the sneaky things then, don't you? That makes sense. Because I was just still thinking, so you're going to fill this thing and there's going to be like wax dripping everywhere.
Yes.
It's got to be more sophisticated than that. And obviously it is. It's the way in which you use it and the angle at which you're using it as well. So, right. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I remembered to ask you those things. Fabulous. And the other thing, so the dyes, what sort of dyes do you use for these? Is there specific ones?
Yes, there is. There are certain sort of dyes that you need. You need something that goes on cold because you don't want to melt the wax. But you also need one that can actually then, because to get rid of the wax, you need to boil the fabric. So you need something that can actually deal with the heat without running, so it has to withstand the heat. So that's where it makes it a bit more complex. So you do narrow the field, but there are a lot of pre-mixed ones that you can buy online, or you can get powders that you mix up.
Right.
I find for my workshops it's a lot handier to fork out the extra little bit for the liquid dyes. They last. I pour them into little pots and then you can pour them back into the container in the bottle, and it's a lot easier to rather than mixing things up.
So then when it's dried, then you boil it and that takes the wax away.
It does, yeah.
And so how do you do that? Do you just do that in a pan, or do you have to boil it for ages? How does that work?
I often use small pieces of fabric because then I can patch them together. But so I can use an old saucepan. That's what I do.
Right.
But out in Indonesia, when they're doing large pieces, they have quite a big sort of cauldron that they put the whole fabric in. And then you have these great big huge things that are they look like large chopsticks that you use to get your wax out of the hot water. And it always reminded me of that story about the people that were eating with large chopsticks. I think it was the people in hell who they were supposed to try and eat, and they couldn't eat because the chopsticks were huge. But then when they went up to heaven, they were there and they still had the large chopsticks, but what they were doing was feeding each other, and so they didn't starve. And it just so it reminded me of that story.
Brilliant. All right, so then you can pick the wax off then.
What happens is it boils in the water and then it floats to the surface because it's lighter than the water, so it floats to the top. Right. And you scrape it off the top of the water and then you just pull your fabric out.
Right, because then I was thinking, then are you going to have to try and get rid of something that's got all this waxy stuff in the water, and it's
no, so
you can see my brain going, how would this all work?
So you get the wax off and then you pour the water away because it's just water, you then add the wax, the old wax, into some new batch of wax that you're making. And then
so you can use it again then?
Used again and again, yeah.
Right.
So they don't waste anything out there.
No, this is what I'm thinking. I thought, well, there's got to be good ways of doing all of this. So, thank you so much for explaining that. That's been brilliant. Fabulous. Right. So I can tell that you really enjoy doing your workshops and passing your knowledge out. Yeah, the other question before we move on was, I've done silk painting before. So now that's a similar kind of idea. You put in the gutter, but that's a resist that stays there. So same kind of, is that something you've had a go as well?
I have had a go at that, and I think it's very similar in the fact that you can use it as it stops the dye from traveling all over the fabric, doesn't it? And when you're painting the dyes onto batik, the wax is working as a gutter, whereas with silk painting you're not removing it, you are removing it because it sits up on the fabric with wax. But it's very similar.
Right. Okay. Right. I'll stop grilling you now. Now, do you have any stories of when something perhaps didn't go quite as planned and was even maybe a bit of a disaster? And more importantly, what did you learn from that experience? Can we have disasters in batik making?
Well, yeah, you can always have disasters in everything you do. And that's what I tell people when they're doing their workshop. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can always, at the end of the day, if it's not quite how you like it, cut it up, use it in patchwork, embroider over it. You can do so much. It doesn't have to be the finished article. Obviously, I think sometimes in the past, the one that's the horrible one is when you've gone too far and you've done too much. And you look at it and you think, I should have stopped half an hour ago.
I mean, you put some more, more wax on and another colour and another pattern.
Colour, and then and then it just is too much. But I think one of the things I remember when I was on my degree course, I did a lot of photography. Well, I do still. I like photography. My camera broke when we were away, so I shared a film with my friend, and she insisted on developing the film.
Yeah.
And not me, because she didn't trust me. I don't know why. But she didn't spool it on properly, and so some of the bits stuck together. And so you had all these patchy bits, and she was going to throw it in the bin, the whole film. And I'm like, but that's the only chance we have. We've got to at least find some pictures of it. And she's like, no, it's completely gone. And so I fished it out of the bin and double exposed with it and did all sorts. So where one image had stuck to another and it had a hole basically in the middle, I used that and double exposed it over another one so it looked like a frame around the outside. And I found what I learned from that is actually nothing should go in the bin, drives my husband nuts because I don't throw anything away. And me and I think I passed it on to my kids. The kids always picking bits up and thinking, I can make something out of that. Yes. So we were always looking at rubbish and actually thinking, no, we could do something with that. You do that and you do this. And I think I get inspired by some of the disasters, and you end up with something really interesting at the end.
Yeah, it did. And so how did your photos turn out then after all that messing around? What were you pleased?
Yeah. I mean, I even sort of got to the point where I was flicking developer onto the pictures and all sorts, which as a fine art student, that was kind of great and experimental. The photography students who do everything precisely and correctly weren't so happy. They were pretty much horrified by this insane woman who was like doing all sorts and waving her hands in and out of her picture while she was developing, developing the picture. So, because I was like covering over certain areas with a bit of card here and a bit of card there, and it was because I was trying to expose some bits and not other bits when I was doing the exposing. So it was like it was quite interesting, sort of I think performance art as well.
Yes, it sounds like it.
But yeah, no, they turned out very well, and I was so pleased with them. My friend was very jealous.
Yeah. Well, there you are. You see, that's another thing, isn't it? Just don't give up too early. Yes. And as you say, don't just instantly think, oh, that's rubbish and it's got to go in the bin. I think with some creativity, then we don't have to, as you say, throw things away, do we? So
I think some of my best pieces have come out of disasters.
Yeah. And, so many guests have said that, actually, which is why I find this question endlessly fascinating, because we always get something really, really useful out of it. So brilliant. Right. Now, the other thing is, do you have UFOs, unfinished objects? Does Batik feature in unfinished objects at all?
Yes. Loads and loads and loads. In fact, I think I've dedicated a room of my house to that.
Combined with the never throwing anything away,
Yes. I think there are some projects that, all it would take would be, I don't know, half an hour, and I would be able to finish it, but it's like it gets piled up on, and then another one on top and all sorts. So there were loads. I learned some crazy patchwork, and I was going to make that into a bag because everybody else made something small. I started being very ambitious and doing a huge thing, and I did one side. I just now need to finish, and I've done half of the other side, but it's not full, so I can't sew it all together. And all sorts. And I think that one I started about 10 years ago. So there's loads of them. I did actually have one year where I decided that was my New Year's resolution to finish some of these. But I got through about half of them.
But then, of course, was quite good. Yeah,
that's good. Since then, I've now produced a whole load of more.
Well, of course, yes.
Because I do find I go to these workshops and I start doing something, and everybody else comes out and finishes something, and I'm like, but I'm still doing it.
I know. Do you know? I think workshops are one of the major causes of unfinished objects. We don't have a lot in Hull, but I think the last two I've just finished, actually, 2 pieces, but there's 2 other workshops I think from the year before where I haven't finished it yet. Now we're doing a big exhibition next year. I thought, right, I've got to get these things finished. So, but it's so funny, isn't it? Then, and I have got some things stuck in a bag from when I was at York Embroidery School 15 years ago.
Yes,
in 17 years ago.
as a guild, we should actually try and get people to do UFO projects.
Well, I think some guilds do. It's like, let's bring them and get some of these things done. But yeah, workshops are one of the main things, because if you've got a choice of a small thing and a bigger thing, I'm going to do that bigger thing. That's going to be really great. And really, you should just be saying to yourself, it's not going to get finished today because you've only got 3 hours. And when are you going to finish it off? So we've got to be stern with ourselves. I think.
Yes. Start smaller things, maybe. I don't know. Also, I do find the fact that running around after 4 kids, and I homeschool one of them as well. So I don't really get much time to actually sit down. And I think by the end of the day, and you finally got them all to bed, you go to sit down to do something, and you just, I don't know, you fall asleep.
Your brain's dead, isn't it? I find
I can't do it.
Yeah, I know.
And then I also have a pile of mending, which, of course, and beavers and brownies badges and scouts
they're never
badges
ending, aren't they?
Yeah, so every time I feel like I've got to the top of sewing on that swimming badge or this, that, the other. Well, actually, one of my son, every time he gives me a toy to fix, I fix it and I hand it to him. He goes, "Oh, thank you so much. Wait a second." He goes to take it upstairs, comes back with another one.
Yeah. It's endless, isn't it? It really is. But that's the nice. I think it's nice that we can fix things as well. We've got a much mended teddy still on the go here.
I know a lot of people my age, with working and looking after kids and stuff. Sometimes those that know how to sew don't have the time.
No.
And there is also, I actually am so surprised on how many people my age don't know how to sew. And to me, it's like a second nature. And well, of course, you can be able to stitch a badge on, but
we could be going on for days about that particular subject. I mean, I'm older than you. As I say, I'm 54. I've still got plenty of friends who have got zero idea how to do any sewing whatsoever. I do find that quite surprising. I do.
I do get hand-me-down clothes, and people go, "Well, I was going to throw it out, but then I thought you could use it and you could make something out of it." And I was like, even if you just use the material. So I do have sacks full of bits that I've cut up of clothes, but also, someone's had a zip that's gone, and I've been inherited the coat and fixed it up and used it for one of my kids.
Brilliant. Well, that's what we all need to do, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as we wrap up today, Tori, because as usual, our time has zoomed past.
Yeah.
Have you got any future plans or projects that you'd like to share with us as we just wrap up today, Tori?
Well, I would like to. I know a bit about the patterns and styles that have been used out in Indonesia, but I would love to learn more about it. And also, being in Burnley, I would actually like to see how the cotton has traveled, because it was a British colony, and how it's traveled.
Yes.
And actually, from where the cotton was grown in America to traveling, I'd like to actually study that and actually be able to understand and have the whole story of the fabric, which I think would be a really interesting talk to be able to do, and also just fascinating as myself.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that sounds like a really good project to get your teeth into as well.
Yeah. And how the batik leaks back down to the UK. And
it's a whole big, as you say, a circle going around the world, isn't it?
Yes.
That'd be really fascinating. And so in terms of talks and workshops and so on, how are you doing for vacancies and bookings and things like that? Is that kind of steady, or are you booked up for years, or if people want to book you?
I am taking bookings for 2001 now, and I still have some space for that. And if you contacted me, I think there was someone who contacted me recently, and if I've got a space and they've got a cancellation, and they needed someone to fill, and if I can, I will try and accommodate you. So, and if I've got a space, I will.
Oh, that's really good to know. Yeah, but so don't assume that if you do have a cancellation, that is too late, as it were.
Too late. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's true of anything, isn't it? You can always ask, can't you? You can always ask.
Yeah, you can always. Never, no harm in there. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to get a no. So
okay. Well, that's fabulous. Do you know, I've found this absolutely fascinating. I've learned loads about batik, which I knew zero about before. So I'm really, really pleased that we've managed to get our schedules organised to have a chat today. Right, everybody. So remember, you can find Tori on Facebook and Instagram, and her contact details will all be on her episode of Stitchery Stories as well. Thank you so much, Tori. This has been absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure everybody has found it very interesting and learned a lot about batik as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. All right, thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.